Today we are going to cover a very special cooler, a weird cooler, a cooler which is shaped in a way that might suggest that it's actually low profile. However, at the same time they managed to bend that thing so weirdly that they managed to squeeze in two separate heatsinks, making this a C-shaped dual tower cooler. Buckle up, cause this is about to get really weird. So this is the Dark Rock TF2 out of Be Quiet's Dark Rock lineup of CPU coolers. Contrary to every other Dark Rock, this definitely stands out, and standing out is really to say the least here. But let's jump straight into the weirdness, the heatsink. Unlike what you would usually see, the heatsink used on here is neither a regular dual tower nor a C-shaped design. On here, Be Quiet used the bend of a C-shaped styled cooler, but they made sure to perform the bend high enough so that there is space for a fan and an additional secondary heatsink below that. Naturally, the lower heatsink is quite a lot smaller than the upper one, but having it does not count as a gimmick. Ignoring the added heatsink real estate, the secondary heatsink is actually so close to the CPU that the extremely short heat pipe travel distance may have an enormous impact on the overall cooler's performance. Actually, just by looking at it, this thing looks like what would happen if you would take a Nokia C14S and L9i and morph these suckers into a single cooler. And not to spoil anything, but the performance actually reflects that. But let's get back to the heatsink. As the lower heatsink is quite a lot smaller, distributing the heat pipes wasn't that easy. While the upper heatsink gets a total of 6 copper heat pipes, 2 of them are stopping at the base, and only 4 of them are traveling into the secondary heatsink. This does not seem to be any cost-saving measure. I mean, there was just no space for them. But can we just take a second and admire how these bends on those heat pipes look like? For the fans, it gets quite interesting. Although I almost missed it, Be Quiet is not including 2 of the same fans in here. Even if both of these are considered Silent Ring 3 135mm fans powered by a 4-pin PVM connection, one of them is 25mm thick, while the other one is only 22mm thick. Now this doesn't create the biggest difference in the world. The smaller one is spinning at 1300 RPM, while the thicker one is spinning at 1400 RPM. And those differences will not make or break the product. It's just, interesting to know. But also interesting to know is where to install which one. Although Be Quiet definitely thought we would install the thinner one in between the two heatsinks while placing the thicker one on top, I did find out that once you realize that heat pipes are not that fragile, you can pull a bit and then make it fit in there. It really works, and it will give you another 3mm of headroom at the top. But while we are at it, let's talk about size and compatibility. Looking at the whole cooler with the fan installed on the top, the Dark Rock TF2 measures 164 by 140mm, while it stands up to 134mm tall. In case you're planning to do some extra stuff, if you would for example remove the top fan, you could end up with a 107mm high cooler. Although the 134mm height is pretty damn small and comes really close to overall SFF size, it was surprisingly easy to fit it in, but not without any issue. Starting off with GPU issues. Apparently, you cannot install the cooler in each direction that you feel like. As it turns out, the offset of the cooler did not allow me to install that thing with the heat pipes on the upper side. When I tried to do it, it just ended up hitting the GPU. Heat pipes down worked fine though. You can also go with the heat pipes left or right approach. However, in those cases, you need to make sure that the VRM heatsink and the whole thing that motherboard manufacturers tend to just slap on top of the I/O panels is not too high. This can interfere, requiring you to, turn it around. On the RAM side, we also got a little bit of restriction. Here we can go with up to 49mm high modules on the first 2 slots. Though keep in mind that something like, for example, Trident Z's are 44mm high, so you are pretty good there. So far so good, so now let's finally finish off the global stuff. Inside the box you will get the usual army of mounting gear, a syringe of thermal paste, a 2-to-1 PVM splitter, and no screwdriver. But screw that screwdriver, because do you know what is not coming inside of the box? An aneurysm-inducing mounting bridge. In order to install this cooler on top of an LGA 1700, 1200 or every 1150 socket, we need to take the provided Intel backplate and shove the Intel screws through the appropriate hole and secure them on one side using the rubber washers. Outer ones for 1700 and inner ones for everything else. After placing everything behind the motherboard, we can screw in those very weird double-sided nuts. From there, we need to take the mounting brackets according to our socket and screw them down while making sure that the ends are pointing towards the socket. At this point, I also do want to point out that you are perfectly able to rotate the brackets in whatever direction you want, and you can choose so based on how you want to orient the cooler later on. Over on AMD's side, it's actually a bit easier. Remove the pre-installed retention brackets, position the spacers followed by the mounting brackets in an inwards leaning position and screw them down. Now, after splashing some thermal paste on that sucker, guess what? No mounting bridge. Finally, a Be Quiet cooler that comes with that damn mounting bridge pre-attached to the base. This is so freaking easy. Just position it on top and screw in those freaking screws that are permanently attached to that bridge, and everything is so easy. Why is this not standard? This should be on every Dark Rock or any Be Quiet cooler for that matter. This is amazing. This is shit. Anyway, ignoring my overexcitement for a second, let's get to another round of excitement. Benchmarks. While letting the Dark Rock TF2's fans spin at 14 and 1300 RPM respectively, that very little thing managed to keep the 3900X at 52 degrees C above ambient. 52 degrees. By some miracle, this little thing managed to keep the sucker 1 degree colder than the brute force Dark Rock Pro 4 counterpart. What the hell? But this thing is not done yet. On the noise to performance end, this thing does not only manage to piss off the Dark Rock Pro 4 while being almost a small form factor cooler, but it managed to do so while maintaining what is essentially the exact same noise to performance ratio. Absolutely astonishing. Now, of course, there is just a single degree difference between the two, and that is indeed inside the margin of error. But both of these coolers are rated for some pretty high TDP numbers. 250 for the Pro and 230 for the TF2. So no matter the way you look at those are top tier monsters. But the TF2 got a few tricks up its sleeve. Not only is the cooler 28.8mm smaller than a Dark Rock Pro 4, but built together by the book, we actually got 4mm more space for the RAM. 4mm more, while this thing looks like this. What gives? But before I weird out myself here, there is absolutely nothing normal about this cooler. The C-shaped design is weird for the size, the dual heatsink is just weird, and a C-shaped design with 2 heatsinks and 2 fans is even weirder. And the fact that it landed at the absolute top of my Be Quiet CPU air cooler list is really not making it any more normal. But the weirdest thing is that Be Quiet actually ditched the central mounting bridge for something more enjoyable. But we do need to keep in mind that a TF2 has a very special shape and therefore a very special airflow path. Instead of pushing air from the front and then pulling it out in the back like 99% of coolers out there do it, this one pulls it in at the, let's say, top, and then it blows it onto your motherboard, or reverse if you flip the fan. And this needs to be taken into account when building a PC using this very sophisticated cooler. But for me, I really enjoyed working with it. The performance is perfectly fine, surprisingly actually. The design is freaking gorgeous, and the build quality is exactly as it should be. So from my side, it's an absolute recommendation. You just need to consider how the air travels, and you need to, build the PC accordingly. But okay, this should be it for the Be Quiet Dark Rock TF2. At this point, a huge thank you to Be Quiet for sending it over, and if you want to keep watching, have a look at our take on the Dark Rogue Pro 4. On a side note, we now also have channel memberships, so if you are looking for a good way to sell your soul for an RG poop emoji, that's a pretty good way to go. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but it will also serve to pay the person who does the camera movements with which we pretend like we have a slider. I think he really deserves a pay raise now. Anyway, thank you for watching and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.